Some things just go together. Wine and cheese, flowers in springtime, and yes, books and bottles. We pair your favorite author with your favorite drink. Your host of Books and Bottles, Benita Johnson.
Hello, welcome to Books and Bottles. I'm your host, Benita Johnson. This is the show where we introduce you to your favorite author, his or her work, and we pair it with your favorite beverage, usually a wine or spirit. So we're excited to be back again today with another book that's sort of about legacy, like the one we did last time. So if this is your first time watching the show, you're in for a treat. We're excited to have you. Thank you. If you've been with us before, thank you. But either way, we want you to share. So thanks so much for being here, and let's jump right in. So today, I have a person with me, and we have sort of a family connection. Her father-in-law is married to my mom. So I want to introduce you to Miss Alaina Gibbs Humphreys. Hello.
Hello.
Great to see you. Great to meet you. And I'm excited to talk about your cookbook, Melanin Meals. Can y'all see that? Melanin Meals, a soulful collection of family recipes.
Wonderful, Benita. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So I mentioned it's about legacy too, because a lot of times we got these family recipes up here. Nobody ever puts them down, so they don't last, right? We lose them. So tell me about you. How did you get into this cookbook thing?
Certainly. So I'll tell you my motivation behind Melanin Meals. So first, as you said, it really starts with kind of legacy. You have mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and cousins who do a great job in the kitchen of preparing meals and coming up with these recipes, and they pass them down, but usually it's verbally.
Yes.
And I have a cousin who passed away from complications from diabetes. Her name was Tasha Denise Davis. And so Tasha passed away in 2017. And she was a lover of cooking. When I say she could burn in the kitchen, she could burn.
All right now.
And so she was really the motivation behind the reason why I wrote this book, to kind of just write something that pulled together the legacy of our family's recipes that would otherwise be lost.
Okay.
And I dedicated Melanin Meals to my grandmother. And as you said, my grandmother has been around a long time. She's still with us, Wilma Delaney.
Okay. That's a blessing.
She's 96 years young.
Wow.
So born in 1927, Wilma J. Delaney. And there's lots of recipes that if you don't talk to the young folks, when those folks pass on, they would be lost. And so that's sort of the story behind Melanin Meals, were those two family members that motivated me to write this book.
So how challenging was it to get the recipes from them? Because like in my family, I come from my dad's side, they can cook, right? But everybody knows how to cook, but nobody can tell you how much to put in something and stuff like that. And so I can cook too, but I'm not a baker, because I always say baking, you kind of got to be exact. So I know how to cook other things that I don't have to worry about being so exact in measuring. But the other thing, and so I know in my family, I asked my aunt one time, how do I make this pound cake? And she couldn't tell me how. I mean, although her pound cakes were slamming, but she couldn't tell me what to do because I needed to know exact. So how would you, what was your process in getting, because in your cookbook, you say a half a cup of white flour. How that was a half a cup.
Yeah, so for some of the recipes, family members do write their recipes down, and I had an easier time of kind of getting their contributions. But for others, at 96, do you really remember?
Oh, Grandma ain't writing it down for you.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you an interesting story. As I was thinking about writing this book in 2020 and 2022, my grandmother gave me a old kind of worn at the seams Betty Crocker cookbook.
Okay.
I started going through this Betty Crocker cookbook to look for some motivation. How did they do things years ago? And lo and behold, inside the Betty Crocker book are some handwritten recipes that my grandmother probably wrote 10 or 20 years ago on the back of the paper clipping. And you'll see in the book that there are some that were handwritten that she wrote. So some of them we had to it was pulling teeth getting the recipes. Some family members remember their recipes and do a good job of jotting down notes. And others, it was by the grace of God that there were some recipes that they have written down that we still have. And I included some of those clippings in Melanin Meals.
I like that. You know, was that book red and white? Because my aunt had an old...
It absolutely was red and white. Now, mine is held together with a rubber band because that's how old it is. But it was absolutely red and white, yes.
I know that book because I have an aunt. She's passed away. But that was the one I was asking about the cake. And she had that red and white book. And so when I asked her about the cake, she pulled out the book to try to find a recipe and then just kind of tell me based on that, you know, what that was. And she introduced her, her modifications to the recipe and what she did. But yes, I think every good cook had that Betty Crocker cookbook. Whether or not they used it verbatim, they had it as somewhat of a guide. So I can appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. And similarly, my mom was one who, when I moved away to go to college, so I attended college in Hampton, Virginia, I would call home and say, hey, Mom, tell me how to make, let's say, sweet potato pies. Well, I have a corner of an envelope, which is what sometimes people do, right on the corner of a piece of paper. But to your point, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I just worked with those things to kind of modify them to be concrete recipes for the book.
You know, in our communities, we tend to learn to cook really young. You know, I think a lot of us who know how to cook, we've been cooking for a long time. And I remember I was 7 when my grandmother, my father's mom, was staying at a house because my father was had his tonsils taken out. And that was before they used to just put you in the drive-thru and snatch your tonsils out. You know, you used to have to stay in the hospital. So she taught me how to make spoon bread. And it was just so like, I don't even like spoon bread, Grandma. But, you know, she didn't care. She was like, your dad likes spoon bread. So I had to learn how to make spoon bread. And so it kind of sparked that interest in cooking. And so how young were you when you started being introduced to your family recipes?
No, and absolutely agree. I can't tell you an age, but what I can say is as far back as I can remember, I see myself going to school at the kitchen in my mother's house, side by side, whether she was washing collard greens or making macaroni and cheese. And it starts very young where you're just curious about what they're doing and you're watching them do it until so comes the time when they give you some of the pieces that you can kind of contribute and add a little bit of this and add a little bit of that. So I can't say age, but some of my favorite memories are being right alongside my mother in the kitchen. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, so I'm a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania native. But she would cook all the time for holidays and all week long. And I would stay in the kitchen. Unlike my siblings, so my sister, when it was time to cook, she was on the phone or out of the kitchen. But I started very young, probably around 6 or 7, in the kitchen with my mom and just watching how she put things together. And that sparked my love for both baking and for cooking.
But you got to teach me how to bake because I don't bake. But I feel you. You say you went to school in Hampton, and so I don't know how old you are, and we don't ask it on the show. There's no age requirement to be on this show.
Understood.
When I was in college, I used to call my aunts and just talk to them, right? And so this was before long distance was free, so it was very expensive. And so I remember a time I told my aunt, I said, well, I'm about to get off the phone because I'm going to go and buy some pudding. And so she said, pudding? She said, you don't know how to make pudding? And I was like, no. So she told me what to do. And so the first pot I burnt up, and she just laughed. And then we did a whole nother pot. So this is we on this phone for almost 2 hours. So when my daddy saw that phone bill, he's just like, I don't know what kind of pudding he was making, but you need to call your aunt and ask for my money.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's get into your book. So I know in your book, because I have it, Melanin Mills, a Soulful collection of family recipes, you have recipes from different members of your family. And one thing about our community, we do a lot, everything around food. The family meals, it's going to be a feast. Birthdays are feasts, homegoings, it's a feast. Everything is about food. So tell me some of your favorite recipes in this book and the memory that's associated with that recipe.
Absolutely. So when you ask about favorite recipes, as you mentioned, the book is kind of categorized around the family members who help to make contributions. And some of my favorite ones are chicken and dumplings.
Okay.
So that is really kind of an old style.
Who made that so I can go to the chapter?
Certainly. I believe it's under Nana's specialty. So that was one of my mother's recipes. Okay. And it is under chicken and dumplings. Nana's Soulful nuggets. So these are ones that were passed down directly from my mother, Alicia Myers, to us. And it was one of the things where when it got cold out about this time of year, where it's fall going into winter and you want something to kind of warm your stomach, my mother would make a huge pot of chicken and dumplings. And you can use different parts of the chicken to put in there. But I love that you would have a nice warm bowl of fluffy dumplings. And there's two ways you can make it. You can make it the strip dumplings way, which I think is the newer style, or you can do the drop biscuit way. And a lot of folks use Bisquick, but it was just like a very warm feeling as you go from fall into winter in terms. But that's one of my favorite recipes is the chicken and dumplings. Okay.
So since we don't have a wine expert on the show today, I'm going to act like the wine expert. So with the chicken and dumplings, because I'm reading your ingredients, I'm going to pair it with Chardonnay. And Chardonnay is just a common pairing with white meat. And just looking at the ingredients, I think this works well. And I want to know, another good thing about your cookbook and the recipes, a lot of the ingredients are things that we have in the cupboard anyway. We don't have to go to a specialty store as for some of the stuff today and find these eyeball ingredients that may not be in your grocery store. So how has some of today's cooking trends impacted your cooking? And we'll get back to the book, but I just want to know, we got a lot of things now that we just didn't grow up eating.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I'll say some of the things that I believe have kind of impacted today's cooking, a lot of the trends have made cooking easy. So when we did cooking in the past, you figure it's cultural. You spend a lot of time in the kitchen. You spend time with family members. Today, families are on the go. You have 2-parent households where everyone's working, or single-parent households where mom is working. So in terms of how it's impacted my cooking, a lot of the recipes that are in Melanin Meals, you can follow those recipes, but possibly use an air fryer to do the cooking portion. A lot of people using air fryers. So one of my other favorites in the book is the Southern crab cakes. And you can prepare completely following that recipe, but instead of cooking them in the oven, you put them in the air fryer with just a little bit of olive oil. So that's the way where it's kind of trend from today can transcend into the cooking, that our ancestors and others have left over to us.
That's a really good point. I know I'm an old soul. I mean, I still live, but I'm an old soul. I had an air fryer for probably 2 years before I touched it because I'm so used to my cast iron skillets that's on the top of the stove or in the oven, using the Dutch oven. And so my kids were using the air fryer. And then, I just bit the bullet and said use it. But yeah, I was fighting modernization.
And it's easier than you think. I agree with you. I asked for one as a Christmas gift, and it's really, how do you jump in and kind of learn? A lot of it is one button cooking. You just read the kind of quick guide and you're able to do it. But it's things that normally would take us a large amount of time. You think of boiling rice. A lot of people steam their rice in their one pot cooker now, instead of doing it on top of the stove.
Absolutely. All right. So what else is a favorite of yours?
So under the first chapter, which was my chapter, Humphrey's Homemade Helping.
I see you put yourself first.
Of course I did. You have to toot your own horn. So one of my favorites is the stuffed green peppers.
Oh, okay.
And to your point, that's a go-to for me because it's things that you have right in your cupboard, whether it's, the green peppers, rice, tomatoes, onions. It's a lot of staples that we just keep on hand. And that's one of the ones I keep in my rotation as I prepare meals.
I love that because these things, as you said, all of these things on here. Green peppers I buy fresh, but I'm a market mentality person. So I go to the store every day anyway when I'm cooking because I don't freeze anything and I like my vegetables fresh. So, but the other things in here, the garlic and the Italian seasoning and the onion powder, these are things that we have all the time. And it makes it a whole lot easier to cook meals at home when we don't have to, go and buy everything. So, yeah, all right. So for the stuffed green peppers, because we got beef in these, I like something kind of earthy a little bit with the green peppers. So I may use like maybe a South African Shiraz. I think that's going to give me some earth and some pepper. And I think that's going to be really good with your green bell pepper, stuffed green bell peppers. So you got some sweets in here. And I was like, I don't know how to bake. So I'm going to skip to the sweet.
And if you skip all the way to the back, now this is one of my absolute favorites from my childhood. Johnny Mae's Rockin' Rum Cake. Now, my best friend's mother is the kind of brainchild behind this recipe. And as a child, we loved, and this is in chapter 9, Johnny Mae's Special. So it's close to the end of the book. Oh, you are right there.
Yeah.
This is a recipe that as a child, we loved when Johnny Mae would bake a rum cake. Because, when you're under 21, you don't get a lot of alcohol, but there was rum in the cake. And she could put her foot in this cake. And this is one that just really takes me back. If you close your eyes and kind of think of those smells and the scents from someone's, kitchen, it can transport you back to being 12 when, my best friend's mother made her rum cake.
Oh, I'm just looking at the ingredients. And so although I said I can't bake, I think I can do this one because this one is like, you have some shows on Food Network and stuff that one I think is called semi-homemade. So everything don't have to be, straight out the ground. You didn't have to grow the wheat to make the flour. So this one does use box cake mix and that I can do. So I'm going to try this rum cake because I have rum at home. I got everything at home. So I'm going to try this weekend. So I'm going to report next weekend. I'm going to report back to you and let you know how this is. But with rum cake, of course, it already has alcohol. But if you know me, that's never enough. So I would add either, I may do a sherry with this because I kind of like, that warm from the sherry and it kind of reminds you of rum. So I probably would do a sherry with this. So how do you, about the selling of a cookbook? Because I would imagine it's challenging. And so we're going to ask our viewers to buy it. So that's going to be some sales. But I would imagine that it's pretty challenging to sell a cookbook when you're not, you don't have a big name like a Julia Childs or, I don't know, Sunshine. Who's on TV? I don't even watch TV, but, some of the books. Right. So how challenging is it to sell a cookbook when you don't have that big celebrity chef name behind you?
And that's actually a great question. So I'll tell you, for me, I started with my own network. So when you start with your own network, one, it is published and available on Amazon. So that makes it available to the public and anyone who's out there searching. Before a couple years ago, I don't know how many Black produced cookbooks you could find. But to answer your question, I started in my own small circle with family and friends. I belong to several organizations, and whenever they have events, they're always looking for vendors.
Yes.
I do a lot of vending. I'm a member of NCNW, the National Council for Negro Women. When they had their conference this year, they wanted to support an African American business. And so they said, Alaina, you should come and promote Melanin meals at our conference. So then I had a table there with my books to sell. Similarly, I host a book club, Shades of Brown. Well, then all of my members who are members of Shades of Brown were some of the first ones to raise their hand to support the Melanin Meals cookbook. And then, as I mentioned, being from Pittsburgh, I'm a member of the United Book Club of America, the Black Book Clubs of America. And they had an event recently in Pittsburgh where they were looking for vendors. So then I sort of take Melanin Meals on the road, and anywhere they're doing craft shows or have table setups, that's where I promote Melanin Meals. So beyond family and friends, out to events at tables where you can set up and sell your cookbook.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you being here. We do events here in DC and of course in Richmond. I'll be keeping you posted in case you're coming through. You want to come and set up, be my guest. So I really appreciate you. Thank you. I want to encourage our viewers to pick up the cookbook. There's lots of great things in here. The pictures are in color, so y'all can see what it's supposed to look like when you finish. If it don't look like this, you did something wrong. So thanks, Alaina. If there's authors out there and you'd like to be on Books and Bottles, please send me an email at info@grosprod.com. We love to have you. Just hit us up, send us the book. I'll read it and we'll have you on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please remember to share. Pick up Melanin Meals on Amazon, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.
Cheers.
Join us, Indie TV, where you will see the talk shows, movies, drama, action, and comedy. Be the first and see it first. Sign up now for free at Indie TV.